With Georgia on the horizon, how much of Alabama's Kalyn DeBoer offense have we really seen?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA Radio Network. Luke Robinson, that's me. Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. I want to thank you everydayers for joining us every day, and you newbies, you're welcome to be here, and you're welcome, and thank you. Also, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and I'll tell you about FanDuel in just a bit. Jimmy, Bama Online came up with this question. I'm not trying to steal material from them all the time, but it's an easy question. Yeah, you own it, remember?
Yeah.
But it's a very poignant question. How much of Kalyn DeBoer's offense have we really seen? And he actually had a bit of an answer about it. He talked about how, look, I haven't put in a lot of stuff because I don't have some dudes that I want for those spots. But we're able to use stuff I didn't use at Washington because I got other dudes I can use for that. I thought that was a very interesting answer, and it makes a lot of sense, but I don't know if I learned anything. I can't figure that out.
I think on the one hand, there's an obvious answer to the question, and that's no, we have not seen all of the Kalyn DeBoer offense. I mean, that's, I think, 1,000,000% obvious. But this is sort of a pet peeve of mine, and boy, do I have a lot of pet peeves and soapboxes out there. I have soapboxes just stacked up in the garage, apparently, because I think people make too much of this. And I'm not talking about the Kalyn DeBoer question. I'm just talking about year after year. I'll always read about how, oh, well, we're not showing them everything. We're saving it for X. And I think that's dramatic overstatement. It's not really correct. The idea that we've only put in a certain percentage of the offense because we just knew we'd drill Wisconsin. I mean, we're in a 14-13 game with South Florida. You lose that game, the whole season is wrecked. You don't just save things for later because you don't need them now. You work on what you're going to work on. Now, what happens is every week you have a new offensive game plan, and sometimes those game plans add layers to what you've already done. And that's what I mean. We haven't seen the DeBoer offense because there's more layers to add. There's more plays to do. You can say, and it can be this simple. Hey, you know how against Western Kentucky we lined up in our D formation? Remember that? And y'all know against like South Florida, we ran the Y play. Okay, this week we're going to run the Y play again, but we're doing it out of that X formation. We haven't done that yet. So stuff like that happens all the time, every week. And I guess that's what people mean. Have we seen all the DeBoer offense? No, we haven't. They do a ton more stuff than we haven't seen. But it's not like they don't load the gun, for lack of a better analogy. Like, okay, well, we have 6 bullets in the gun, but we only need 3 bullets for these first couple games. So we're going to stash the other 3 in the garage, and we'll pull them out when we play Georgia. That's not how this works. You got to have your arsenal because you never know when you're going to be 14-13 with South Florida in the fourth quarter.
I think all that is very true. And let me tell you, okay, so the first thing I thought about was when you were going on that rant was there are 2 times I can distinctly remember, at least Alabama. I can't even remember it with anybody else. 2 times I can distinctly remember when Alabama brought in some kind of funky game plan to a game that was so unique and different from what they've done. The first one is the 1993 January 1 Miami game when we just brought everybody up on the defense up to the line. That is so famous and cool. Now,
great example.
It worked.
We haven't done that all year. People acted like, oh, that's Alabama being Alabama. We hadn't done that in a single game all season long.
Now, and it worked well because it threw Miami off. It also worked well because we had the personnel to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had dudes all over that 92. That was a Saban defense.
That was one of the great game plans of all time because Miami hadn't prepared for that. Why would they? They hadn't seen Alabama a single snap all year.
I haven't seen anybody do it yet since then.
It was unique. Most teams won't do that because, hey, you better have some man coverage dudes at TB if you're going to do that. And Alabama did.
The second time was in 2004 in the Iron Bowl. Alabama came out under Mike Shula, unbelievably, and ran the wishbone against Auburn. And we were like, okay, we hadn't done that. Like, nobody's done that. Does Nebraska even do that anymore? No, they don't. This is crazy. And it worked, if you remember, a little bit. And all it took was Auburn to have a halftime adjustment to where it didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So my point is, I'm like you. It's not yet. You might do a variance of a certain lineup, but you're not going to do something crazy different.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's really more about who you have running this. Now, and the other thing is, see, I think what we're meaning more about this question, or what DeBoer meant more with his answer, was that, hey, I've only had a spring and a fall camp and a few games with these people here. And I not only have to teach them my stuff, I have to unlearn what they learned before about some certain terminology, certain expectations, just the whole fit of the offense. So when I get my kids in here, eventually, we will expound on what I have. These guys are learning the basics. This is 101 stuff. And yeah, some of them are, I mean, Ryan Williams, definitely, he's in the 400 level stuff, just in whatever offense. But for the most part, we're in the 100 levels, and occasionally we'll move some people up into AP. I know AP is before 101, but you know what I mean. I forget all my college stuff. I don't know how college works anymore. So
I also think, without saying the names, he might have been referencing Michael Pinnocks and Jalen Milro about how different they are. That the game is called differently because the quarterbacks are so different. We've run a ton of RPOs. I don't know how many of the fans or other listeners know this or notice this, but we've run a ton of RPOs. Didn't do a whole lot of it last year. We did more than people think, but we didn't do a whole lot of it. Right now, we're doing a lot of RPOs. But Pinnocks and Jalen are so different, I believe, and I'm no Nick Sheridan, but I believe the general premise behind an RPO under Milro is you're going to see a lot of runs. He's going to give it to Jam or Justice, or he's going to keep it himself. And the P part of the RPO isn't really something that's used a lot. They ran a ton of RPOs last year in Washington with Pinnocks, and the P was the biggest part of it because they wanted Pinnocks throwing the football as much as possible. I think with Jalen, they're sort of feeling him out a little bit, and they're giving him more and more latitude, by the way. That was a good question somebody asked Monday at the press conference about, how much latitude does Jalen have at line of scrimmage, and DeBoer acted like he had a ton, which was interesting because I don't think that's anything that would have happened last year. But my whole point is it is a different offense, and I think there's still some feeling out going on. And there's also a, hey, let's give Jalen some rope. Next week, let's give him a little more rope. Next week, let's give him a little more rope. And then all of a sudden, let's see how much he can handle. And, hey, so far, so good. I think the kid's generally playing great. That's why he's roughly running second about every Heisman straw poll I see.
Don't cheat people who are listening. I'm going to ask Jimmy this, and I'm curious what his answer is. I just looked it up. How many yards rushing did Pinnocks have last year? Don't cheat, but you got to.
I'm not cheating. I don't even have my hands. My hands. I don't even have my mouse. I'd have to.
I know, but you got to at least hum, because if you don't, when you go silent, it makes me want to put our ad break in there.
I think he rushed for 180.
You're only 172 yards off. He rushed for 8 yards last year.
8. Well, 8. Obviously sacks. Although he's only sacked like 12 times.
Okay, I know. That's what I'm saying. His O-line won the Joe Moore.
His RPO was, do I hand it to Dylan? What's that guy's name? Dylan Corey. Why am I?
Corey Dillon, that'd be something.
Dylan Johnson. Do I hand it to Dylan Johnson, or do I throw it to Rome Odunze?
You would literally have to hand it to Corey Dillon, like, here, old man, while he's in his wheelchair.
Long handoff. But Dylan Johnson. So his RPO was, do I hand it to Dylan Johnson, or am I going to throw it? Jalen's RPO is, am I going to hand it to Jam, or am I going to keep it? I mean, but it's still an RPO, and I'm sure the play design is similar-ish. And I bet, this is one thing, I've already said this on the show this week, And I want to, I don't want to give things away to Georgia. How the heck would I know? If I knew this to be a fact, I wouldn't say it out loud. I'm theorizing here. I think by the end of the year, we're going to be throwing it a ton on these RPOs. Yeah. I think it is going to look more like Pinnocks by the end of the year. I think they're still just kind of feeling Jalen out, doing what Jalen does best. And then, like I said, it's all layers. They're going to build on it.
Which goes back to how much of the offense have we seen? Well, in a way, you've seen all of it. In a whole another way, you haven't seen the ways it can branch off.
That's exactly right. Just adding layers, adding complexities, building it around what does Jalen do well? Let's do the heck out of that. What is he not doing well? Let's sort of eliminate that. And one other thing I'll add, and I know we got to do a break here, but Alabama in that first game played a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. Against Wisconsin, you saw almost none of that. I mean, there was some, very little. It's mostly 11 personnel. I'm wondering if there's a big switch for Georgia. No, we haven't seen. We saw a lot of 12 early, a lot of 11 now. Very little 10 personnel, which means 1 back, 4 wides. And we've been running a lot of 3 wides and a tight end wide. But what we haven't seen is a lot of 4 wide, where you're putting a ton of speed on the field when you do that. We haven't shown that look, and they've got that. So that's an example of what we haven't seen. I don't think Kirby's going to faint. Kirby's like, oh my God, they're in 10. We didn't prepare for this. Of course they have. But we hadn't shown it.
Yeah, that's right. And one other quick stat, because I'm obligated by my own contract to point out something cool about Ryan Williams. Do you know how many catches he has on the year?
8.
10. And I remember each glorious one of them.
One of them was a bad throw. We tried to get it to him on like a wide receiver screen, and Jalen didn't throw it well. And he had to twist himself to a pretzel to come up with the catch, and it went for no gain. That's the one that didn't go well. What cracks me up is like every play they think is a bump. I think Jalen Milro completed about a ball to him that went about 16 yards in the air. Ryan then took off for 40 yards, and people say there's another Milro bomb. No, that's that intermediate ball that you say he never throws. That was dead on the money.
Yeah, that should have been perfect. That should have debunked several things, but it just left them all bunkish. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
That's fine.
I do know something I'm going to say right, and that's FanDuel, because we love FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and the current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. That's the beauty of it. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sports book to find out more about this. I'm about to tell you about something I'm passionate about and I love, and that's Roy. Hey, Bama fans, if you heard about Roy, you probably have through me. It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for athletes, and Roy changes the NIL game for fans. You can directly support players by directly. Oh, wait a minute. I've messed that up, but that's okay. You can directly support players, I should say, with Roy. That's the cool thing. You play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness. Look, you also get exclusive content. When fans contribute to a successful campaign, they receive access to exclusive content from that athlete, such as their announcement decision, behind-the-scenes footage, et cetera, et cetera. No-risk contributions. This is the part you really want to listen to. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes a decision that aligns with the fan support. If not, the money is returned to the fan. So that's pretty awesome. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter the referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000. Just visit Roy.com for additional detail. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. I'm telling y'all right now, y'all need to get in on this Roy thing. I know Roy. I mean,
Get on the bus, Gus.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you got to, because it's good. It's going to be big. I'm telling you, it's going to be a thing. And you want to help Bama have good years. We need good players. This is how you do it. This is what you start with. What a brilliant idea. Let's talk a little Georgia. First and foremost, I think it should be said, Tate Ratledge will be out for this game. He is a Georgia starting offensive lineman. This is a loss. It's not the end of the world. It's not like Alabama losing Andre Smith in 2006 or something like that. But it is a big loss. He is a senior. He is a great player. I think he was preseason all SEC first team and probably preseason All-American by some teams.
Yeah, he's a candidate. Like some people thought, if Tyler Booker's not the best guard in America, Tate Ratledge is. I mean, that's how good he is.
Yeah, very good player. So, and it's not the end of the world, but it's something.
It's news.
So what else have you, I know you've started thinking about Georgia. I mean, we all have. So what else are you thinking about the Bulldogs right now?
I think they're super dangerous. They're super good. I mean, this will be now I will say this. All summer and all spring, I'm like, well, Georgia will be the best team we play all year. The hardest game to win. I know it's at home, but that's the hardest game to win because it's the best team we're playing. I have since changed my mind. And I haven't really dinged Georgia for they're not as good as I thought. But Tennessee is so much better. I think the game at Tennessee is more difficult to win than the home game against Georgia. And what I'm giving is a nod to Tennessee and how tough it is to play in Knoxville as opposed to home. So, but I do think that in my mind, the Tennessee game in Knoxville has replaced the Georgia game as the most difficult one to win on Alabama's schedule. I actually feel pretty good about winning this game. And yeah, I admit it has a little to do with how good Alabama looked last week and how Georgia struggled against Kentucky. It doesn't have to do so much with those 60-minute games. That's more to do with, hey, Georgia's a lot like they were last year to me, which is really good, maybe the best team in the country, capable of beating anyone, including Alabama, but not invincible. I think 2021 Georgia was ridiculously good. 2022 Georgia may have been even better. I think this team's a little more 2023 Georgia, a team, by the way, defeated by Alabama in Atlanta, and Alabama's returned some of those players and added some good pieces. So I'm saying if Alabama beat this team in Atlanta last year, they can beat this team in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be tough, though, because this is the best personnel Alabama will face all year, player 1 through 22. I think I see too many negative comments about Carson Beck from Alabama fans. Y'all, I mean, he's good. He's real good.
Yeah,
he's next level good,
I
mean,
let's not give him a lot of bulletin board fodder. He's good. And just because you don't like him and just because he's for Georgia, and I mean, he's really good. I mean, do I think he's the number one pick in the draft? I mean, I think that's a risk, but I also thought Bryce Young was going to be a phenom. And so, I mean, I may not know what I'm talking about, but I'm just saying that
the difference between being the number one pick and being the best player in college football, to me, those are two entirely different things.
Well,
he's got a better chance to be the number one pick than to be considered the best college football player, in my opinion.
There's also a difference between being the number one pick and the number one pick by the Carolina Panthers.
That's been in the news a lot this week. I don't know if y'all have heard this, but yeah. And boy, Bryce taking way too much heat, in my opinion. But I get it. I get that hey, let's see what happens with Dalton. I think Dalton's going to play a little better. Is that because Dalton's better than Bryce? No, it's because he's 58 years old. He's seen everything. Just the one thing Bryce really lacks. That's one thing Bryce lacks. Dalton has in spades, and that's experience in terms of dealing with virtually everything. No one's going to throw something at Dalton that he's like, oh my God, I don't know what they're doing here. I don't know what to do. He's always going to know what to do. He's just not as physically gifted as the younger Bryce Young. But I think Dalton will probably play a little better, and some fans will go, aha, it was Bryce. But, hey, Dalton's not going to go out there and win the games. The Panthers aren't good enough.
The flip side is that Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold were at the Panthers stinking it up. Now they're flourishing in other places. So who knows? But, going back to Georgia for a second, I think the one thing that stands out to me is Georgia was getting to that point for me where I didn't know them as well as I knew Alabama, but I knew like most of their starting lineup. Right. And that for a guy who doesn't study Georgia, That's difficult to know. I don't know it as well this year. So I think by default, I feel like they're still really good. I mean, I went on a radio station today and talked about them, and they were like, I just don't think Georgia's, I was like, yeah, okay, but Georgia's like Alabama and Ohio State. You take a step back, and instead of being the undoubtedly best team in the country, you're probably the best team in the country. That's just not much of a step back.
Yeah, this has to do with Georgia and Bryce. Just thinking, and everybody's got a different opinion on this. If you're listening, you may have different opinions. I don't know how many of y'all have seen all these teams, but if you took Blake Shapen off of Mississippi State and put him at Georgia this year, would your opinion of Georgia change? And by that, I mean, would you go, with Shapen, they're not winning the national championship. They're not winning the SEC. They're not going to win 12 or 13 games, not with Blake Shapen. Would that be your opinion? I mean, it wouldn't be mine. I think they might still be really good. I agree. It's a step back. It's a step back. Is it a dramatic step back? I don't know that it would be. And my point being, okay, I'll put Carson Beck at Mississippi State and Starkville. I mean, they're not going to win any more games because Carson Beck's a quarterback. No. And that's what I'm saying about Bryce. And that's what I'm saying also about Beck and Georgia. Beck's good. I think he's going to be the first pick, but you better put a good team around him, and Mississippi State's terrible. I think Blake Shapen's probably one of the best players on their team. It's just kind of hard to tell.
Let me ask you this. Doesn't Blake Shapen sound like the guy who finished third in America's Got Talent? Doesn't he? I mean,
is that a specific joke that I should know more about? Because I don't
know. No, I'm just saying, I don't think Blake Shapen could win The Voice or American Idol or America's Got Talent.
No, he wouldn't.
But I think he could finish third.
Yeah, he'd be in the running. I get this. Now I get it. My only thing I know about the show is my mom watches it. My parents and I asked one night when they had it on. I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, hey, that Simon Cowell is he mean to these people like he was mean to the people on Idol? And they're like, no, not really. And I'm like, not interested then.
Yeah. You got to have mean.
Someone's like me mean to the help, then I'm not watching.
We need dogs on that panel, Jimmy. And we're going to talk about a couple of dogs Alabama's still recruiting as soon as we get back. Time to talk some game time. Love me game time. Use code LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off your first purchase at Game Time. Download it anywhere you get your apps. It's an app, and I can use it. Jimmy can use it, and I used it for my Wisconsin tickets. And I know some other people used it for the Wisconsin tickets. And I don't know if you've heard, I had better tickets than Coach Patrick Murphy, who coaches the softball team and who has won a national championship. And, hey, look, I was like, hey, should have ordered them from Game Time. I mean, that's the way to go. Because Game Time let me see where I was going to be. We were under the upper deck thing, and I forgot we were. That's on me. I forgot we were. And so the two dudes I was with that are kind of balding, they ended up having to buy hats, and they could only get Wisconsin hats. So they had Wisconsin hats with all their Alabama stuff, but they were like, it's worth it not to have, melanoma on my skull. I don't know what any of this has to do with Game Time. It doesn't. I'm just
melanoma?
What?
Melanoma? Is that what happens?
Melanoma. Oh, nice.
On a bald head?
Nice. Very, very well crafted. Anyway, check out Game Time. You will love it. I've used it for everything from World Series to NBA to college basketball, college football. You've heard me say this a million times. Go to Game Time because you know what time it is? It's game time. So, Jimmy, Alabama is still recruiting dudes. I know, contrary to the myth, and Alabama has maybe begun recommunicating. You know how when you broke up with a girl when you were a sophomore and then you get back to school as a junior and, about midway through the junior year, you're like, I wonder what she's up to. And y'all both call each other. Next thing you know, you're hooking up. That's Ivan Taylor.
I wonder what my old girlfriend Ivan Taylor's up to.
Ivan Taylor's just sitting in his bedroom, kicking his legs up, got his hands in his chin like this. Going, I wish Alabama would call. And so
Taylor Ivan would be a cool name, actually. That sounds like a supermodel.
It does. But Ivan Taylor committed to Michigan. Alabama was in the running, was committed to Notre Dame at one point. But hey, commitments are just what they are nowadays, and flips are a lot of fun. So
Same as
maybe
the
Ivan
girlfriend
Taylor,
stuff. You can't get off this girlfriend analogy.
I can't, I can't. So maybe Ivan Taylor, who will be here for the Georgia game, right?
He is. He
Yep.
is. And so is Derek Smith, who we're talking about too. And both safeties. Alabama doesn't have a safety committed in this class. And, you know, a couple of months ago, people were the woe is me, and we don't have enough commitments, and we're not recruiting any safeties, and this feels a bit disastrous. And then you look up and it's like, well, what do you know? Alabama's still in it for Ivan Taylor and Derek Smith. I'm here to tell you, I absolutely do not rule out Alabama landing either one of these kids. And I know it's an uphill battle a little bit. Ivan really likes Michigan, committed to Notre Dame at one point. He does really like Michigan. It's not going to be easy. Derek Smith's obviously locked into Auburn to some degree. But if he was that locked in, he wouldn't be coming to the Georgia game. Alabama recruiting his brother. That's a factor in this, I believe. So don't rule out Alabama ending up with two guys that you could almost argue are two of their top safeties. Here's one more safety name. I don't think this will happen, but I'm going to laugh if it does. I will find it funny, and I will fight the urge to go back and find old posts on BOL and bring up some old takes exposed type stuff. But here's another name I don't rule out at safety, though less than a 50-50 chance. Anquan Fagans. Don't rule that out. Don't say never on Anquan Fagans.
Well, a couple of things have happened since Fagans committed to Auburn, Smith committed to Auburn, and Taylor committed to Michigan. A lot of stuff has happened in the time that those guys have committed to those schools, not the least of which was each of them has a loss at home.
Yep.
Now, Michigan's is a little bit more explainable because, I mean, if hindsight's 50-50, as Pat and I said, but looking back now, we should have known, oh, yeah, Texas is coming in with a team that's still loaded for bear, and Michigan is rebuilding at everything, including the coaching staff. This should have been easy pickings. Auburn lost to a Cal team that, yeah, they're undefeated. They may go to Florida State and win this weekend because Florida State has officially mailed it in. But they're still Cal. They still don't have near the athletes Auburn does. I don't care what the recruiting rankings have been lately, even under Brian Harsin. And it still was at Auburn. And so and Hugh Freeze still hasn't shaved, best of my knowledge. You have to be wondering if he's like, what exactly have I signed up for? But my point is that you look around and go, okay, maybe going to Alabama isn't such a bad idea. Michigan had all this momentum. Auburn's got all this momentum, and a couple of losses have derailed that for them. And Michigan's got USC this weekend. Auburn's got Arkansas this weekend. Neither one of those are surefire wins for those two teams.
Yeah, I'm not much in the modern recruiting world, Luke, in 2024 or whatever year this is. I'm not tied into so much that where a team loses a game and a kid's like, I'm not interested in them anymore. I don't trust them to win enough games. I'm not going there because I think NIL has sort of replaced a lot of things as the biggest factor out there. But I don't rule this out. There could be, and maybe there won't be. I'm famously bad at predicting what happens over there in Lee County. I'm famously bad at it. But what if Auburn loses to Arkansas? And now you're looking at their schedule and you're like, where are they going to find wins? I mean, if they have a disastrous season, which we cannot rule out, they've already changed quarterbacks. They lost to Cal. They haven't played an SEC game yet. Here comes Arkansas, who everyone expects them to beat. And they might. They probably will. I think they're favored to win. But if they don't, I'm just saying some chaos could lead to losing commitments regardless of NIL and handshake deals already in place. That can happen in modern football. I don't think it's so much of, well, Alabama finished 10-2 and Auburn finished 8-4, so I'm going to sign with Alabama. I think it'd take more chaos these days to really shake up someone's commitment list. But don't rule out Fagans. Do not rule out Derek Smith even more. And of all those three safeties that we're talking about right now, probably the best chance is Ivan Taylor.
Who I'd probably – no, I don't know. I may want Derek Smith. I don't know. I want Ivan Taylor too. I'll say this.
Very good for – Ivan's going to be a good teammate. I'll say maybe it's the Michigan thing in my head, but he's going to be a Keon Sabb level leader on the team. Put it that way. I mean, I see leadership in Ivan Taylor. Got with the NFL dad. He's committed to Notre Dame. They take nothing but Eagle Scouts up there. I mean, I like what Ivan Taylor would bring to the locker room. And that's not to say I'm dissing the others. I'm absolutely not. I'm just saying Ivan Taylor's intangibles off the field I find very valuable.
He's actually the lowest rated of the three, I believe.
Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, Derek Smith is like, to me, a 5-star. And I was saying before the season, top 5 in state. I've never changed my mind on that. I mean, I think he's a top 5 prospect in state. And I would love to see what Colin Hitchler in Alabama, which was one last thing I'll clear up about him, because I read this too much about, oh, he's going to Auburn because they're letting him play wide receiver. That's not how recruiting these 5-stars works. If Derek Smith ever told Alabama, I want to play wide receiver, I don't want to play DB, you know what? He played wide receiver. All that's happened is Alabama looked at Derek Smith and said, we think your best position is safety. What do you want to do? And he's like, oh, safety sounds good to me. And then Auburn's telling him, we like you wide receiver. And Derek's like, oh, that's cool. I like playing wide receiver. He didn't pick Auburn because they're letting him play the position he wants. That's not how Nick Saban did it, and that's not how DeBoer does it. Look, in this day of the transfer portal, have y'all noticed, has anybody out there noticed this? Players aren't moving positions anymore. It used to be a thing every spring. You're like, well, we're moving 5 guys to other spots because there was no portal. You're trying to find a place. Well, he couldn't do this. Maybe he can do that. That doesn't happen anymore because back then, if you told a player, we want to move you to offense, and they said, oh, I don't like it, they just say, too bad. It's not like you can transfer out, but now you can. Position moves are over unless the player is 100% on board with it. And the same thing happens in recruiting. You can't make a kid play a position.
All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back soon with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.